referring to is Representative Aaron Schock. But instead of raising the question about whether Schock is gay, the biggest question now is, should reporters be doing this at all? Joining us from New York is Noah Michelson, the editor of Gay Voices at the Huffington Post, and from Washington, Chris Geidner, legal editor at BuzzFeed. All right, Noah, I want to start with you. Schock has got a 100% anti-gay voting record. Does that then mean that the media has a responsibility to call him out on his hypocrisy?
I personally think that outing is a very powerful tool, and I think that when it's done right, yeah, I think that there is a responsibility. When people are voting against our rights and are actively campaigning against queer people, and then they're living queer lives off the page, sort of, I think we should call them out. I think the way that this happened is messy and does not fall into the realm of how I think an outing should happen, but that's a whole other story. I think outing is important.
And that's a story that I want to get to, but first, Chris, I want to get to something that you tweeted out earlier. You wrote, "I just don't see stereotyping someone as being helpful in any way, as a journalist, as a gay guy, or as a person." Is this basically bullying?
No, I mean, I basically agree with everything that Noah just said. I think that there are instances, and this comes down to the way in which it's done, as Noah said. I think that talking about whether or not somebody's gay is fair game and should be treated the same way that we would talk about whether or not somebody's dating a woman, and that's a part of every conversation that we have. But I think that when the comments go down to the type of pants that Representative Schock wears, it gets into an area where it's a little nasty, and where you're sort of putting the same sort of stereotypes out there as being negative that these same sort of people would complain about if somebody's doing it towards kids.
Now let me ask you, what's off limit? As a journalist, I tend to have a rule, and that is that if the personal life of the politician or the celebrity has nothing to do with public policy or with our lives, I don't have the right, I think, to ask them these personal questions. So what's the limit? What's your rule now?
Well, I think that the limit is basically the limit that you set for yourself, what you just said. If it's something that you would talk about with a straight celebrity about, it should be something that you should be able to talk about with a public figure who you believe is gay.
But no, it's not a one-to-one ratio, right? I mean, you look at someone like Larry Craig. At the time when he was outed, it actually would have probably been potentially dangerous for him to come out. I mean, forget about not being able to get reelected. Like, put that aside. I mean, like, it is possible at certain periods of time in the United States that being gay in certain parts of this country poses a very real danger. And I do wonder, is there a responsibility on the part of journalists, even if someone is a hypocrite in terms of the way they live their life versus the way they cast their votes, to on some level consider that person's safety and well-being?
Well, you know, an interesting thing is that some people say that actually, you know, Schock is asking to be outed, and he actually thinks it would be a big favor if people outed him by the way that he conducts himself, with the number of rumors and the number of, you know, unsubstantiated reports of the people that he supposedly, allegedly has slept with. And so some people say that this is sort of like a calling out, and that actually he's just waiting for someone to out him. I do think that outing can be dangerous, does come with consequences, but I still stand by the fact that if you are going to vote against my rights, and then you're going to turn around and you're still living a gay life in some respect, I think that you need to be called out. I think that in 2014, it's no longer okay for people to be anti-gay, anti-queer, anti-trans, and especially if they are living and enjoying aspects of that life.
So don't you think that outing is a personal issue first, and that we really have to wait until he says if he's gay or not, and then we can ask him about that? I mean, isn't that completely personal?
No, not if I think he's benefiting off of homophobia and transphobia. I think in that case he's a hypocrite, and it's not a personal decision anymore. His actions are having direct actions on my life, and I think in that case then I'm totally comfortable calling him out as a hypocrite and outing him. Again, though, we have to talk about, we don't have any proof of him being gay. He said on the record that he is straight. So as far as I know, you know, he's claiming he's a straight person, and the way that Hod kind of outed him over the weekend is, again, not the way that I think an outing should happen.
Well,
I want someone to come forward. I think that maybe that's what Hod wanted as well. I think maybe Hod is hoping that by sort of cracking the door open, we're going to have some other men who actually have slept with him come forward. We're going to have some actual witnesses or people who are part of this story actually speak up.
But my question is, Chris, is that then the right way to do it? I mean, is opening the floodgates of someone's sexual history the way to get a proper coming out?
Well, I agree with Noah that when you put forth this discussion and you don't provide, the reason why it was a Facebook post, and this is what I wrote on BuzzFeed over the weekend, the reason this was a Facebook post is because this wasn't something that Hod as a journalist would have been able to publish somewhere else. And I think that the standards for what you're going to talk about should be the same, regardless of whether we're talking about straight people, whether we're talking about if somebody's gay or not. And this report this Facebook post didn't live up to those sort of expectations that we set for ourselves as journalists.
So let me ask you, do you think we could have had this conversation 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or simply the media and the social media is changing so fast that we can have this conversation now that it was impossible just a couple of years ago?
And that was something that I wrote about as well, that what Hod's post proved was that there are going to be limits to how much the media can avoid these questions. For a long time, there was nobody who would ask the question, but now, as Hod proved, when he apparently felt that enough people weren't asking the question, he asked the question in a forum that he was able to ask it in, and it did get people talking. It got me writing over the weekend, it got Noah writing, and got you guys holding this program.
No, let me ask you something. Do you see a distinction between new media and traditional media in terms of what can be discussed? I wonder if this kind of conversation could be done on a big network, for instance.
Well, there are fewer limits there are fewer barriers because more people can participate in social media. So it's easier for a story to start, and because there aren't the same sort of limits and standards, it allows conversations to begin more quickly than they would have.
Yeah, and I agree as well. I think that we are no longer waiting for sort of mainstream media in a lot of ways to sort of lead the charge in these kind of stories. And like Chris was saying, a lot more people can all of a sudden join the party and sort of, either involve speculation or involve evidence or however you want to say it. And I think this is true of queer culture in general. The internet has had a profound effect on queer people because no matter where you live now, you can see representation of yourself, which, 10, 15 years ago, if you lived in the middle of the country, maybe you didn't know another queer person. So the internet has and will continue to have a huge effect, not just on outing, but on the way that queer people live their lives and exist in this country and around the world.
What a party it is. Well, it is so great to see you both, Noah and Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being with us today. Yes, El Día de los Reyes Magos, the three kings, and we were discussing the translation in Spanish. It would be
three magicians.
Three magicians, kings. Happy
Three Magicians Day.
Thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.